is up, everyone? Today there is a Poulan 2150 2.1 CI. I'm assuming that's cubic inches. It makes sense. And the complaint is that the person bought it at a yard sale and used it for a minute or two and then died. So I'm assuming we have a problem with the carburetor, maybe old gas. So let's take a look at the fuel first and see if that's a... I know it's not the entire problem. Let's just take the cover off and see what we have going on there. On second thought, let's see what the condition are of the fuel lines and the fuel. Fuel lines are practically petrified, and there's like 2 ounces of fuel in it. Yeah, those fuel lines are hashed. I mean, it's old. It's not super old, but it's old. I have to do carb work. I don't know if I have the necessary filter for this. May have one. I know I have a kit, at least if it's a Zama or a Walbro, which I don't know what other types it would be. Unless it's like one of those weird versions. I don't think so, though. Oh, it's one of the foam filters. Okay, that's good. And it's not too horrible. Okay, we might have lucked out a little bit. So when you take these off, always have the choke closed, like it is right now. The one time you don't, or the one time you forget, you'll never forget again, because these nuts will go into the intake. Well, yeah, you could probably get it out without opening it. You're going to be shaking this thing up and down, and this is not exactly very light, especially when you're frustrated to begin with. Eventually, if your frustration gets to you, ask me how I know, this will not just be shaken up and down to remove it, it will just be thrown across the room. But don't do that if that's not your saw. If it's your saw, feel free to throw it across any room you want. Or even outside. Okay, get some pliers. This is going to be one of those primer bulb scenarios where it doesn't have a normal primer bulb, it has like an external. Oh, what? Word of knowledge from anyone who doesn't know it already: fine screws go into metal, and those coarse ones generally go into plastic. So if you're ever unsure, remember that. Okay, let's see here. Let me check if I have one of those. I do not, but it's not too horrible. I think I might just be able to reuse it. Okay, those fuel lines came off exactly how I thought they would, in pieces. auto linkage is not going to be fun. There we go. Actually wasn't barely. Finally got that thing freed. And the choke we're just going to take with us. Let's go clean this. Carb wasn't too horribly dusty, but it had its grime. This is usually the tail right here. So I mentioned this before, anything that has an external primer bulb, you never connect the primer bulb to the inlet of the gas. You're not pushing gas into it, you're pulling gas through it. So you attach it. The out goes into the in of the primer bulb, and then the primer bulb out goes to the tank. In from the primer bulb does not come from the tank, and then out does not go to the carb. So remember that. If you do that, it'll run kind of for a couple seconds and probably die. You might get lucky and have it run a little bit longer, but it won't last very long, and if it did, it will be completely choppy. It's not horrible. I think a lot of it was mainly the fuel lines, but we'll still replace that. And we'll clean this. You probably don't need to clean this, but if you're already here, why not? A lot of times you don't really even need to use anything more than just a diaphragm. Other parts are fairly resilient. Like this blue piece. Yeah, oh, look at that. It's pretty sludgy in there. See what would happen if we didn't take this end off? We would not have seen that. That is a definition of someone who did not have a fuel filter on their fuel line in the tank. And then eventually all that fine dust that accumulates in the tank, which it happens at every tank because it's a chainsaw, will go into the carb and then right there. Come on. You can do it. There we are. I have to clean that up, but it's not too bad. Okay, so the high screw is half, 1, 1/2, 1 3/4. Okay. The low screw is half, 1 1/4. 1 1/4 and 1 3/4. Okay. This is the part that I usually have a hard time remembering. Sometimes the needles are different, and which needle goes in what. So, let's take a look at the needles. This is low and this one's high. The low is longer. Okay. Go ahead and put this in the carb cleaner, and then in the meantime I'm just going to put the new fuel lines in there. Just take them out and put them back in the same way you took them off. That's pretty easy. Everything is out of the cleaner. Everything looks pretty good. The little screen filter on the other side is looking pretty clean. Everything else seems to be good. Took a little closer look at the needles, and there's pretty much no way you can mess them up because one is completely the different size with... I messed this up. So, that's good. That's why I like Marlboro carbs. They, for the most part, make it a lot easier than some Zammas. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure Zamma's a great carburetor too, and they are. I just like Marlboro. That, and I don't know if Zamma has done this yet, but Marlboro has came out with a spiral carb kit. I put in a leaf, dang it, in a leaf blower of mine, and it so far is working pretty good. Granted, it's only a couple months old. I mean, you could put anything in there for a couple months and probably be okay. And I don't use ethanol fuel, so it's not a problem. But if I needed to one time, must be a pretty desperate time, but if I needed to, I could. That's the key right there. Rather have the ability and not need it than need the ability and not have it. Okay. That on like so. So after this, I'm going to connect all the fuel lines. Like I said, this primer bulb actually says tank and carb on it, so that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and reconnect everything after this, and then put some fuel in there. And we should be good. You want to see the fuel go into the primer bulb about 5 or 6 presses later, and then it should be about half to 3/4 full. If it's not, then you probably have a problem. It might run. If it's a little less than that, some steels, for whatever reason, even when they're brand new, will be like a quarter, and they'll run just fine. But for the most part, you're going to want to have a pretty decently full primer bulb. Okay, I'm just going to finish this up, bring you back. The mistake that I told everyone else not to make, I accidentally made. Just looking at the tank, well, the lines in a weird angle, and I end up looking at, I thought was the fuel line, it actually turned out to be the line coming from the primer bulb, so I was having a real hard time priming it. So I got it back together. Let's give it a pull. Compression. gonna be a hard one. Let's try it at least. As much as I think this saw doesn't have much life left into it after looking and pulling on the handle, more or less, if you are pulling on the pull cord and the weight of the saw lets it drop very quickly through the compression strokes, your saw is pretty much worn. But I also think it's flooded because I took the muffler off to see, and the actual piston looks great. So I figure I blew it out, blew off the plug, and see what happens. Oh. Let's try that again. It needs some tuning. Let's see. Let's turn the idle up a little bit. Put the cover on and let's do it again. Let that idle for about 5 minutes with it nice and warm, and then I didn't really even have to adjust it. I just literally adjusted the idle. Other than that, it seems to work great. You do need to adjust this with wood, but I'm gonna go cut a piece. If I need to fine tune it, I will. The rule of thumb, at least for my experience, is you want to, when it's in the high RPMs, want to run a little rich. A little rich will give you a little needed power. If it's a little lean, it will just bog. So I like to start off a little rich. If I need to lean it out later, I can. Other than that, it seems to work good. I think it's an older saw, yes, but I think it should be good for a little while. Maybe even after doing that to increase compression. You know what? I think it did. I mean, it was definitely a lot worse before. So I think maybe the oil in it was just causing it to lose compression when I was first testing it out before I was able to start it. That does not appear to be the problem now. I mean, yeah, it's not great, but it is a used saw, so. Okay, other than that, I'm going to sharpen the chain, give it back to him. I put a little oil in the filter because it was a little dry. Blew it out. Looks good. New plug, new fuel lines, new fuel filter, non-ethanol fuel, new diaphragm. That came back to life. So it should be pretty good. Okay. Have a good night. Definitely subscribe. Put a comment below. Put a thumbs up. I'll catch you on the next video. Have a good night.